In this series, I'm going to explain the newest edition of the Chemistry GCSE curriculum. And for our first topic, we are going to talk about the states of matter. First of all, what do we mean by the word matter itself? The word matter is used to describe all the substances and materials of which the universe is composed, like for example the air around us, like rocks that we throw in a lake to make the water move so it can make circles. A very important note that we need to keep in our minds is that all of these materials that the universe is composed of have two properties in common. First, they each occupy space, which means that they have a volume. And secondly, they have a mass. The scientists have found that matter can only exist in three different forms depending on the conditions around them. And these different states of matter are known as solid, liquid, and gas. Each of the three states of matter has a certain general characteristics that are true whatever the chemical substance is being considered, and we can summarize them as follows. Solids and liquids have a fixed volume, where gases have no fixed volume. They just expand to fill the container. Now when it comes to shape, solids have a definite shape, where liquids and gases have no definite shape and they just take the shape of the container that they are in. And finally, fluidity. Solids do not flow because of their shape. Liquids generally flow easily, and lastly, gases flow very, very easily. The three states of matter can change from one into another simply by changing the temperature or pressure, or by changing both at the same time. So when we increase the temperature of a solid material like ice, which is a solid, at a certain temperature it will become liquid water. The process of turning solid into liquid is called melting. So whenever you hear the word melting, you should know that it means turning a solid material into a liquid. Melting point is the exact temperature at which solids turn into liquids, and it has the same value as the freezing point, which is the exact temperature at which liquids turn into solids, which means that the freezing point is the exact opposite of the melting point. Let me illustrate. Let's take water again as an example. Water freezes at 0 Celsius. This means that liquid water, and focus on the word liquid, will turn into solid ice at 0 Celsius exactly. On the opposite side, if we take solid ice and heat it to 0 Celsius, it will melt, which means that it will turn into liquid water at 0 Celsius as well. And from this experiment, we knew that freezing and melting points are opposite from each other, but have the same value. If we keep increasing the temperature of the liquid water, at some point it will turn from liquid to gas, and we call this vaporization. Water again as the example, at 100 Celsius, liquid water will turn into gas, which means that water vaporizes at 100 Celsius. Evaporation is simply a process that occurs at the surface of a liquid. In this process, the surface of the liquid turns into vapor, and this phenomenon happens at any temperature below the boiling point. We mentioned earlier that evaporation occurs at any given temperature below the boiling point. But what happens if we keep heating the liquid? The liquid then will reach a certain temperature where vapor can start forming from inside the liquid itself, not just the surface, and that is what we call boiling. Just like freezing and melting are opposite, there is an opposite of the boiling process, and it's called condensation. And this transition usually happens by cooling the gas. However, an important note that we need to keep in our minds is that the gas state is the one most state affected by changes in pressure. So it is possible at normal temperature and without any cooling whatsoever to condense a gas into a liquid by only increasing the pressure. Let's summarize the states of matter and the transition between them in relationship to the temperature. When we start increasing the temperature of a solid material, it will melt, producing a liquid. Let's keep increasing the temperature of that liquid. Eventually, it will evaporate and become a gas. And these are the relationships between the states of matter and increasing the temperature. But what will happen if we reverse the process and start decreasing the temperature of a gas? Decreasing the temperature of a gas will condense it to become a liquid. And by cooling the temperature more and more, that liquid will freeze to become a solid. Water evaporates fairly easily, which means that water particles keep turning into a gas at the surface of the water at all temperature as we mentioned earlier, and has a relatively low boiling point, which is 100 Celsius. Ethanol also has a relatively low boiling point, which is 78 Celsius. The only reason that I mentioned those facts about water and ethanol is to state that they have a low boiling point. That means that the particles at the surface evaporates easily. This phenomenon where the evaporation of the particles at the surface is easy is called volatility, and the liquid that evaporates easily is called a volatile liquid. That was it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed it, and see you again in the next video.